everybody, my name is Erin J. Bowman. I'm also known as the Panoptical Poet. Now, I'm really sorry that I can't actually be there with you guys today, but I'm actually also an education assistant, and even though you guys are watching me on this video, I am currently working at a school in Castlegar where I help out in the classrooms. But I'm really glad that I got to send you guys this video and got the chance to talk to you guys about things that I think are really, really important. So thank you for taking the time to be here with me, so to speak. So yeah, like I said, I don't make all of my money as a poet because that can be really difficult, but we're going to talk more about why it isn't impossible and why you shouldn't let anybody stop you from pursuing your dreams a little bit later. But I am the Panoptical Poet because panoptical means of many views. So I think of myself as a poet who is trying to show many different sides and viewpoints of this world in the work that I do, because I think that there are many different viewpoints and sides of things, and for the most part all of those viewpoints and sides are valid, and we need to make space for all of those. So I guess that kind of brings us to feminism, because feminism, as you guys have probably already learned about, was a movement that was created to make space for women in a world where we were not given space the way that we should have been. So what is feminist poetry to me? To me, if you identify as a woman and you are writing poetry, you are writing feminist poetry. I recently heard this great quote on the internet by a woman named Bethany Webster, and the quote is, "Women's undiluted honesty is a huge threat to patriarchy." And that is a great, great quote, because the whole point of feminism was that women were not given space or voice. But many, many women chose to use their voices anyway to demand that women be given the space and the right to be heard, just as everyone on this planet, every creature on this planet deserves the space to live and to be heard. So I write a lot of poetry about that. I will give you a little bit of background about myself. This may be surprising to a lot of you, and you don't have to agree with me or anything like that, but I personally don't identify myself as a feminist, and I have a few reasons for that. For one, I don't like labels. I think that in our society we tend to have this idea that we need to define and categorize and label everything, and then so often those labels like woman, man, other labels, you know, they get used as a way to divide us, not just define us. I also think that in the course of feminism, there was a problem with, in particular, what is kind of referred to as white feminism, because just as it happens in a lot of other areas of our lives, white women were using feminism as a way to try and tell women of color how they should live their lives. And that is definitely not the place of white women whatsoever. And because of that problem and my feeling about labels, I choose not to identify myself as a feminist. Now, that being said, I think it's very important that we take this moment to recognize that I am allowed to stand here and speak to you today because many women chose to take on the label of feminist and to create a movement that helped bring us to a place where I can choose how I want to identify myself. And that is so important to recognize. So, you know, if you don't want to identify as a feminist, that's okay. But I do support a lot of the principles of feminism. I also think it's important to recognize that gender inequality has two sides, and men and boys are oppressed in their own ways as well. It is very, I believe, it's in different ways Like, you guys have probably heard messages as you were growing up, like boys don't cry, and, you know, things about how girls should be pretty. Boys can be pretty if they want to. Boys can cry. Girls don't have to be pretty. Girls don't have to cry. Whatever you feel is good for you, as long as you are not infringing on the rights of someone else, that's what you need to do in your life. So on that note, I'm going to read you guys a poem that is actually going to be published pretty soon. This poem is going to be published in an anthology called Poems by the Heron Clan. And this poem is called Unprogrammed, and I'll explain where it came from after I read it. There's also, well, I'll read it and then I'll tell you more. Anyway, I'm excited and nervous. I'm so glad that you guys are listening to me. So, Unprogrammed. I type the adjective smart into my text line, and the computer programmed autocorrect brain comes up with words like phone, board, tablet. Even as I press the G key, it only suggests guy, give, growth. Anything but the word I am actually aiming for. I send my fingers swiftly to the I, R, L anyway, because no one can auto-correct this girl. So you can see that that line, because no one can auto-correct this girl, is also on my shirt. We're going to talk more about that later. But some of you may or may not have gotten that, but that poem was about texting. One day I was trying to text one of my friends, and I was talking to my friend about, I can't remember the entire context of the conversation, but there was a smart girl. And autocorrect often suggests words that it thinks you might want to put together. And I typed in smart, and my phone basically refused to give me the word girl as a suggestion to go with smart. And that really made me think about the messages in society that we are given all the time, even by things that we love very much, like our phones. And I think it's really important to be very aware of those messages. I'm pretty lucky that I grew up with two parents who were pretty aware of the messaging of society, and they wanted to make sure that I knew that as a woman I could be anything I wanted to be, and nobody was allowed to put me in a box. So they were really careful about teaching me how to look at the media messages and how to decide what were healthy things for me to take in and what were things that I needed to think about, and think about how I could either change or reject those messages. So I have a poem for you guys that I wrote about my mother and a little bit about how she helped me become the woman I am today. And this is called Growing Pains. As a child, I would sometimes wake screaming in the night, and my mother would come down to my room to rub my legs until I could sleep again. The doctor said it was growing pains and said they were normal for such an abnormally tall child. He chucked me under the chin and said it would all blow over, but in the moments when I believed my legs would expand until they blew apart, my mother's fingers made me forget how painful the world can be. Tall was just one of the ways that I was abnormal. Like my parents, I would never fit into a 9x5 box and be a model member of modernity, and my peers perceived that even then. As far as the kids at school were concerned, I basically was just a face that only a mother could love. And while she fiercely did, there are some growing pains that no hands can rub out. Some invisible scars that embed themselves into the core of your being like carbon particles hiding under layers of pure glacier. My mother understood those scars. Like me, she too was once a youth with awkward graces, hiding behind a shock of hair, hoping no one could find her there. But secretly, my mother was a siren, armed with a guitar, a pen, and a desire to see the world in similes. With a heart that could span the length of the Arctic ice caps, and a smile that could melt most men, she could have been anything. But she used her talent to write worlds for me to escape to. Places where it didn't matter what was on my t-shirt or in my lunchbox. She showed me how to move mountains with metaphors and litter my life with alliteration so that one day I could script the story for myself instead of just being an extra, seen as directed by society. Even though she couldn't wipe away every tear and kiss each bruise, my mother stretched herself into a foundation for my being, and I only hope I can grow to be half the woman that she is. So there's a lot in that poem. I have a very good education, And I think that that has helped me in a lot of areas in my life, including my writing. The things that I talk about in there, like alliteration and metaphor, those are all things that will make people understand your messages better. So I'm really glad that I have a bachelor's degree in English. I've learned a lot about history and gender studies, and I've also learned about behavior because of my job, and all of these things have helped me with opportunities in the world. And I'm not sure any of that would have been possible if my parents hadn't taken the time to teach me how to, reject messages and take in good ones. So yeah, some background about that poem as well. Me and my mother actually used to sing together when I was a kid. We used to travel around the Kootenays and sing together, and there was some lines from one of her songs in that poem. So that was kind of my way to pay tribute to my mother for the lessons that she helped me with in becoming the woman that I am today. So I think I will just read you guys one more poem, and then I'll talk a little bit to you about how I've become a poet, because even though I do have another job, I am making some money as a poet, and I am learning how to use this as my side hustle, and maybe even eventually just make money by being a writer, which is what I love. And you guys can do that too. It takes work. You have to work hard. Anything you want in life is going to take hard work. Feminism, bringing us to this place today, hard work, but aren't we all glad we're here? So this poem is called 90s Kids, because that's when I was a teenager, and man, that was a really interesting time to be alive. So 90s Kids. Here's to the kids who never put down their skateboards. Despite fresh gray and their sideburns, they still deem four wheels on a plank, sans helmet and pads, of course, a more than acceptable way to travel. To and from work, to the grocery store, or anywhere else most adults would take a car. Here's to the kids who still blast Pantera to pump themselves up before a big boardroom meeting, who hide concert t-shirts under suits and ties like some kind of undercover rock and roll hero. Here's to the kids drinking pennyroyal tea on a plane in utero, and here's to Dave Grohl for carrying on without Kurt. Here's to the kids who are becoming moms and dads that are tattooed and pierced and have hair that is too long or too bleached, a far cry from the poofy bouffant do's and polo shirts their own parents put on to be parents. Here's to the kids who run small backwoods farms and eat sumptuous concoctions of roots and tubers that they have harvested by hand, the ones who install solar panels on their roofs in an effort to live sustainably. Here's to Wayne's World and Stuart Smalley, its pat, deep thoughts, and everything that decade of SNL churned out for our entertainment. Here's to the 90s and to the kids from it, who aren't buying into the reality that capitalism has created for us. The kids who are becoming adults who still don't believe in 9 to 5, or bottom lines that lack heart, or food that isn't food, who have long hair regardless of gender that comes in 3 colors. Here's to the kids who will never put down their skateboards. And so to me, that poem was kind of about just commemorating all the great things about my youth, because when I was growing up, parents to me looked a lot different. Like, all the parents kind of dressed a little more like a lot of your teachers maybe do, and even teachers looked different. Everybody wore suits and ties, and it was like there was this certain way that everybody had to look and be all the time. And a lot of the people that I grew up with, who are now your parents, helped to start breaking that stereotype, just as you guys can do in your own ways. So yeah, as I said, I think I'll start by explaining the t-shirt that I'm wearing. So it's as it says, because no one can autocorrect this girl. And on the back, it talks about how it's from my poem Unprogrammed and made by the Panoptical Poet. So I do love writing, but it can be very hard to make a living as a writer. So I started to try to think about other ways that I could use my creativity and my writing to make money, and making t-shirts was one of the ways that I thought I could do it. Interestingly enough, some of the worksheets and stuff that you guys work on, visuals, I'm starting to make stuff like that as well as a way to make money, because it's still writing, so it's a way to do what I love. Now, it's not all boring stuff, but you do have to be creative in how you make money as a writer if you want to be a writer. But I also now get to go to music festivals, and they pay me to go to music festivals and read my poetry to people. And I give workshops where I get to teach people about how to write poetry, and I get paid for that too. I'm trying to think about other great opportunities that I have. I get all sorts of performance opportunities, and all of this has taken hard work. And I wasn't always sure I would get there, partially because I think the messages that are given to women, but bullying was a problem for me in school, as maybe you heard about in my poem Growing Pains. Yeah, there was a lot of messages given to me as a young woman about what I should be and who I should be and what I couldn't do. But I chose not to listen to any of that, even though it was sometimes hard and it was sometimes painful. But I kept finding ways to use my voice and express myself and do the things that I love. And that is what keeps me going. Yeah, I don't know if I feel like there's probably lots of things that I should say or could say, but I don't know if there's anything else that I feel like it's really important to tell you. As I said, you know, if you identify as a woman and you write poetry, I think you're writing feminist poetry. But just like with the problem of white feminism, and express yourself, but try to be careful not to silence other important voices in that process. Because, you know, like we talked about, there's so many viewpoints and sides to this world. And, you know, take a look around you at the classroom, the people sitting next to you right now. None of you guys look alike. You probably all have different ideas about what you like and how things should be. And all of those ideas are valid. And it's really important that you guys, you know, in your classroom, you guys work together to make sure that you're like a team, you know, and that everybody's viewpoint and ideas get used in your world of your classroom. And that's what we need to do in the world in general. So please go out and express yourselves, either through poetry. That was the other thing I wanted to say about the t-shirts. I looked at other art because I found that maybe words weren't enough to express my feelings. So, you know, I started drawing and making t-shirts, but anyway, I'm digressing again. So as I was saying, please use your voice, and maybe your voice comes out in a painting or a poem or whatever, but use your voice, do what you love, express yourself, and that will help to, and you know, don't, like I said, don't silence other voices in that process, and then we can make the kind of world that we want to have, where everybody has the equality that they deserve, the true equality that they deserve. So because I can't be there to answer questions, I was thinking that if you guys wanted to tell your teacher some questions, maybe she could send them to me, and then maybe I could make another video answering some of your questions if you guys are interested in that. No worries if you don't have questions too. I get it sometimes when you're in school, you know, and these presentations are like, oh, I just want this to be over. And if that's how you feel and poetry is not your thing, that's okay. Go and find what you love and a way to express your voice. But yeah, thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions. As I usually say at the end of my videos, Panoptical Poet out. Have a great day, guys.